It's the Salamone Podcast. With me, Michael Salamone. Tonight, it's the year-end 2014 in review special episode. I've got guests, Theologian Quincy Worthington, artist and comedian Gary Peters, and stage actor and all-around great guy Owen Niland is here. Thanks for tuning in. Now let's have a show. All right, 2014 is nearly gone, and it's time to look back, as many types of shows do. I've invited conversations with stage actor, longtime friend, great guy Owen Niland, longtime friend of me and the show, theologian Reverend Quincy Worthington, and comedian and great visual artist, as well as musician, Gary Peters. And I had conversations about 2014 and the events with each of these gentlemen, and we'll hear bits and pieces throughout this broadcast. It was quite a year with lots of events happening in the second half that I think are going to be quite important to talk about. I hate to be one of those shows that looks at celebrity deaths, but there were so many big names in 2014. These are just the most notable: Robin Williams, Mike Nichols, Phil Everly, Pete Seeger, Philip Seymour Hoffman, Shirley Temple, Sid Caesar, Harold Ramis, David Brenner, Mickey Rooney, Joan Rivers, The Ultimate Warrior, Reuben Hurricane Carter, Bob Hoskins, Maya Angelou, Casey Kasem, Bobby Womack, Tommy Ramone, Johnny Winter, James Garner, Lauren Bacall, Don Pardo, and Jan Hooks all passed in 2014, which I think symbolizes a change in the landscape of entertainment media and thus popular culture. And I think that's what we'll look at throughout this broadcast today, is the effects of 2014 on popular culture. So we'll talk about some news items throughout the year, as well as pop culture items, entertainment items that kind of influence the psyche or the way of life in contemporary American culture, at least as it's perceived by the mass or by the media. I guess there's a lot of interpretation you can go with there. In January of 2014, we saw Obamacare go into effect. Same-sex marriage really passed throughout many states. I hate calling it that. Marriage for all peoples. And in Colorado, where I live, we started selling pot recreationally to adults 21 and over. I talked with Reverend Quincy Worthington about these issues. Let's start with his comments on the first year of Obamacare.
Well, I think it went better than most people thought it was going to go. And it saw a lot of ups and downs. And, the criticism on it is that it needs improvement. But I think Obama even said it needed improvement, but he just wanted to get something in place. And I think as far as that goes, he did the right thing. He put it in the corrective course. I get tired of the Congress trying to constantly waste their time by overturning it and not doing other things. But, overall, I think, it went well. It went better than expected, but, there's still some flaws in that system that need to be worked out, from what it sounds like. So
I also asked the Reverend about marriage equality and the change we saw with more and more states coming on board with this basic civil right.
This is breaking news. I actually am slated to do a same-sex marriage, which I hate calling it that, but marry a gay couple this March, I believe it is. They just asked me about 2 weeks ago, and my church approved me presiding over it in our sanctuary, and so I'm all for it. I think it's the right thing to do, and we'll see if there's any fallout from the more conservative factions of my greater church denomination. But I'm excited for it. I think it's the right thing, and I don't think it came soon enough. But it's here now, and hopefully it's here to stay. So,
another topic that Reverend Worthington and I spoke about was the events in Ferguson with Mike Brown, and of course in New York City with Eric Garner, which is why this broadcast began. I needed to work through Ferguson with someone who I respected, so our first show was Quincy and I just kind of talking about the issues surrounding it and trying to process everything within the first couple of days of Mike Brown's murder. I asked Quincy what we learned throughout the year with these issues and maybe where we're headed, and here's what we got.
Yeah, I don't know what we learned, to be honest. I think what's happening is a shame. I don't think we're done hearing the end of the fallout from Ferguson, and especially the Garner case, where, the Brown case had a lot of ambiguity. The Eric Garner case doesn't seem to have that. It's pretty appalling what happened to the police. I think what really needs to happen is, if you look at the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s in this country, you had some really strong leadership show up. They were organized. They, I don't want to say controlled the crowd, but they had specific goals in mind. They had organization on their side, and they didn't tolerate really people stepping out of the line of what the organization and the goals were. And you don't have that with these protests, which I think is why you see, riots breaking out in Ferguson, and, why you see things happening, like the shooting at 2 police. Now, that's not to say that you didn't have that kind of actions during the civil rights movement, but you also had a cohesive, organized movement that was the mainstay of it. And we're just not seeing that. And I don't like to it's not my place to armchair quarterback black leadership, but I'm not sure where we're seeing that right now, at least not in a national front. I don't think Al Sharpton or Jesse Jackson are helping the case. I think from what I saw with the police shooting in New York, I kind of feel like the mayor of New York got a bad rap, and I think Obama's getting a bad rap having it blamed on them. I don't think this is anybody's fault per se, except for the man who pulled the trigger. But we need solid, stable leadership with integrity and character, and we don't have that yet. And so my hope is for 2015 that not only do we not put this back as a 2014 lesson, that this is a conversation and a movement that continues to happen, but that happens with more cohesiveness and more purpose of mind with specific goals on what it's trying to accomplish.
We'll hear back from Reverend Quincy Worthington throughout the broadcast on some other topics. But I went to stage actor, a friend, and a guy who kind of has a lot of great pop culture sensibilities to ask him about the allegations against Bill Cosby, who has been accused of being a serial rapist for quite some time, but these allegations have really come to the forefront towards the last part of 2014. It's been a troubling story for me because not just the subject matter, which is deeply disturbing, but culturally it represents yet another end of innocence. Someone that we have looked to never would have imagined as a predator because he was a familial influence in our lives these last, 40 years. Here's what Owen had to say on the topic.
It's really tragic, and how do you put it? You want to look back on kind of like your childhood heroes. I mean, I wore out the VHS copy of Bill Cosby himself that I had. He was, a stand-up master, and I'm sure still is obviously a successful comedian, but, to have your personal life tarnish your reputation and whatnot, it's really extraordinarily sad, I think. So, who knows? The allegations seem pretty consistent across the board, but everyone's due their day in court, so we'll see what could happen in the future there.
I asked Gary Peters about the other big headline towards the end of the year here with the Sony hacking. It's been quite a year for hackers and hacktivists. I think that it's impossible to ignore that at the forefront of the Ferguson and the police brutality movement has been the hacktivist group Anonymous. They are really the thread that has helped that community in organizing their protests and definitely with taking on the KKK. You can't ignore the big celebrity nude hack that happened earlier than that, where Jennifer Lawrence and all sorts of young women's private photographs were somehow hacked from the cloud and then disgustingly released to the public. And then most recently, this scandal back in October that Sony was hacked and their documents started coming out, which right around the end of the year became a big deal because Seth Rogen's movie, The Interview, was pulled because of supposed threats of violence. So I asked the gentleman to comment on this, and this is what Gary Peters had to say.
My biggest, the thing I'm waiting for right now is to see what kind of a response this last group of hacks, the Sony hacks, when President Obama came out and said that we were going to, do something that was do something back at them. I don't know. It just seems very ominous, but I don't know that if we do anything, it'll ever see the light of day. I mean,
well, today
I'm waiting to see
they
what
announced that North Korea was out without internet today.
Oh, so they just shut it off, huh? I missed that. I must be getting my news through North Korea. I missed that whole thing.
Quincy Worthington questioned things a little differently, so let's listen to his comments on the matter.
Well, I wondered if this isn't something from Sony itself, because they knew this movie was crap, and so they just needed an excuse to go straight to DVD. And so they're like, we could boost this movie by saying North Korea was super pissed about it. But that probably wasn't a good movie anyways, and so this was their way of bolstering sales on it. That would be my guess. If it wasn't North Korea,
they were
it was Sony
back in
itself.
October.
Right, right. Yeah, because it just seems weird. I mean, come on. Team America was way more inflammatory than this movie could possibly be, and North Korea didn't hack Sony back then, or hack that movie company, you know. So, I think if I were going to pick between a Seth Rogen movie and a South Park movie that was going to come out about me, I'd probably shoot down the South Park movie before the Seth Rogen movie.
On a lighter note, I talked with several of the gentlemen about the things that were the number one in the country during 2014, or the most of a particular topic. For instance, in the world of social media, Ellen DeGeneres' selfie from the Oscars was the most retweeted, posted on Facebook, circulated across social media. I asked stage actor Owen Niland about that topic, and here's what he had to say.
You know, I don't know. I think it's great. I mean, Ellen has a singular ability to kind of connect at a personal level with celebrities in a manner that, you know, we think that we could as well. You know, Ellen has been in the game long enough that she's built this persona around herself of the every woman, and she just kind of is the cipher that we like to put ourselves over. I think that she's phenomenal, and that's why it was a fun Oscars that she hosted, and that's part of what made the photo so popular, because you could imagine yourself doing that with your buddies, as a lot of people did. They kind of recreated that. But yeah, I just think that she really has learned how to kind of leverage the social media universe, you know, to integrate herself into the discourse, which is fantastic.
The other big number one in internet was the most searched term on Google was Kim Kardashian. So I started by asking Owen what that means to him and popular culture.
I am consciously uncoupled from the entire Kardashian universe. They are out there. It's like the ozone layer. I prefer not to think about it. So, you know, it's an entire family of dubious background that they have no real talents other than being wealthy and on television. So I just don't understand the fascination, and, you know, I think that her relationship with Kanye really kind of insinuated herself into areas of culture that she doesn't belong, in my opinion. You know, you have to work, you have to, you know, have something to tie your celebrity to. You know, if not, we're just creating a generation of American royalty. And, you know, celebrities who are celebrities because they're celebrities. And, you know, it's the snake eating its tail. I don't know. I would prefer to focus on, you know, more high-minded things.
Gary Peters had a more succinct way of saying the same thing.
I can honestly say that I did not search for Kim Kardashian all year. But, and that's B-U-T-T, I'm pretty sure other people did.
Another big topic in 2014 that took over in the world of the internet was the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge. None of us escaped seeing friends, family, celebrities drenching themselves in the name of awareness for ALS. I asked Owen Niland to comment on the Ice Bucket Challenge.
The only one I paid attention to was Patrick Stewart. because it was absolutely phenomenal. He took his ice from a bucket, put it in a glass, poured 3 fingers of scotch over it, cut a check, and then enjoyed a cocktail. That's the only way to do it. A bunch of bros dumping ice on one another, not something that I was really interested in spending any time online watching. Nor, however, did I do one. So, I don't like the cold.
In 2014, we saw the Senate report on torture under the Bush administration, and this was a pretty heavy news item towards the end of 2014, even though the events took place earlier in our history. Troublesome to me because so many Americans, at least in polls, said that it didn't mean anything, that it was acceptable. So I asked our theologian of the panel, Quincy Worthington, for his thoughts on this matter.
Here's the thing, is I can kind of understand, I've seen some documentaries where they interview both Cheney and Rumsfeld, who I kind of feel had more involvement in this than Bush himself. And I don't know, I mean, maybe they've just spun it right for them to be the fall guys on it. And I hear and understand their rationale, but it seems to be defeated by the fact that this report is saying that no good intelligence was actually gleaned from these tortures. So that there becomes highly problematic. And it also becomes problematic if you're not into the idea that the ends justify the means anyways, which I tend to think that the ends and means need to meet up. So yeah, it's just bad. It's bad. And when it comes to foreign policy, it doesn't really matter what the American people think so much about it. It's about how we're viewed in the international community, and I'm sure that this report is winning us no friends.
I also asked Quincy to comment on this torture report and the media's interpretation of it, and thus the American people's interpretation. And here's what he offered us.
Well, here's the thing, though. I mean, it's a 5,000-page report, I mean, look at the misinformation that's out on quote-unquote Obamacare and people's feelings on that, and then what happened when it rolled out. And, I mean, I know I didn't spend the time to read the 5,000-page report, but, from everything I hear that's being reported about it, it doesn't sound good. But, again, that's secondhand information, and, sometimes I wonder about how the national news media spins these things. I mean, we've talked a lot about that with the Ferguson case. So, it depends. I don't know how many Americans actually watch the news, and I don't know what news channels those Americans are watching and how those news channels are reporting it.
One of the more lighthearted and for comic book nerds like me and each of the fellows on the panel, in 2014 at the top of the box office was Marvel and Guardians of the Galaxy, a comic book property that no one was really sure you could bring to the big screen, let alone do it successfully. There were headlines leading up to it of being, would Guardians of the Galaxy be Marvel's first flop? And not only did it top the box office in the United States and the world, but it beat the competitors by quite a bit. And it wasn't the only Marvel movie at the top of the box office list. The Captain America Winter Soldier movie was also quite successful. And in fact, it was big action movies, most of them from Disney or Marvel, that were at the top of the box office all the way down to number 16 when Lost Girl charted. So I started with Owen on this topic, and he was another guy who grew up on Marvel Comics like me, so let's listen to his comments.
Captain America Winter Soldier, grounded the fantastic world of superheroes, and I think it was one of the best action movies I've seen in a while. And I think, you know, it was exciting and it's fun, and they really captured the allure of Captain America. I think that was, you know, a great, you know, he doesn't have the cosmic abilities, et cetera, et cetera. But what they also did is they captured kind of the craziness with Guardians of the Galaxy of how out there some of these comic book things can, these comic book characters can get, you know. You think of, like, they took Rocket Raccoon, which when I heard about it, I was like, seriously? They're going to try and do the Guardians of the Galaxy and they're going to have a talking tree and a talking raccoon? But fantastic. It was, you know, the biggest breakthrough movie of the year. And, you know, again, I think it was Marvel's putting out great, well-packaged products. But at the end of the day, it's also a compelling story. They make you feel about the characters and care about them and get invested with them. And I think that's the key in building the successful and, you know, multi-pronged you know, cinematic universe that they're creating. It's exciting, you know. It's as exciting as you know, when you went through the Infinity Gauntlet back in the 90s, you know, and waiting for the next episode or next comic book to come out and, you know, talking about what's going to happen next with your friends. They're creating that same kind of thing, but, you know, in a cinematic world, and they're knocking it out of the park. Now, again, I'll say I've never really been a big DC guy, so I don't watch any of the shows on the WB or whatever channel it's on. But I heard that Flash and the Green Arrow are pretty exciting movies, or pardon me, TV shows these days.
I'm a comic book fan who grew up reading all comics, Marvel, DC, all the independent stuff that I could get my hands on, and luckily I had a great bookstore in Chautauqua growing up that carried a good selection of comics that I could buy weekly. So I'd like to comment on DC before we move on. Big year for DC. Their popular Arrow television program has continued and is really, I think, pretty cool. And this is hard for me to say because they changed the canon on Green Arrow quite a bit. And this is one of my top favorite characters. I know Batman fans and I argue often about this, but I've always been more in tune with Oliver Queen because of his social and political views that are part of that character. We're not seeing that on the TV show, but they're still getting the gist of who Ollie Queen is onto the screen, doing it in a fun WB way, not as cheesy as maybe Smallville was. And they had a spin-off this year of The Flash, which only a few episodes in, so hard to comment, but so far seems to be also pretty true to the character. The liberties they take are understandable, and it's been really fun to watch. DC also has Gotham on Fox, which is kind of a prequel story for the Batman universe. Interesting take on the characters, filmed well, good acting. Not really that cool for me who likes to see elements of the comic book mythos. Of course, with the Batman property, I should be used to that by now, that they don't really care about honoring the background too much. But the exciting thing on television with DC was the Constantine program on NBC, which has not been canceled, but NBC did halt production on, and I'd just like to use this forum to say, please save Constantine. This is the best comic book adaptation onto television that I have ever seen. They are true to the comics. It's exciting to watch. It's really cool to see this metaphysical and religious stuff on a network and done with a network budget. It's really, really cool, and I hope to see it continue. So I'm a nerd. which means another big thing out of 2014 that was nerdy has been exciting for me is that we saw Weird Al have an album top the charts for the first time. So Gary Peters, who's a comedian and, like I said, a brilliant visual artist, but also a great musician and does some good parody work himself, is someone that I grew up kind of idolizing, and he also was a big Weird Al fan, so I had to hear his commentary on this big year for Weird Al.
I have been a fan of his ever since the beginning, man. I was like a Dr. Demento kid growing up in high school.
Yeah.
Listening to old 97 Rock on Buffalo. That was the only way you could get it on Sunday nights. Just get my Weird Al fix. Yeah. I have a few regrets in my life, and one of them is that I've never seen Weird Al live. And I don't know that he's going to be touring after this record. I don't know that he's going to actually be doing anything. He made noise to the effect that, he's kind of hanging it up. I don't know. I'm hoping not. Because,
you said there's probably never another album.
I know. What's up with that?
He did say he probably will do YouTube releases for singles, though.
Well, I think it's almost like a disease for him. I don't think he really has a choice. When you get that good at doing
what he does, for most comedians.
Yeah, exactly. Well, he'll probably be driving in the car and hear the next big pop song and go, I can insert lunch meat into that, or, whatever.
Another 2014 item of news happening towards the end of the year again was the fact that U.S. has decided to normalize relations with Cuba, which is a pretty major change in policy, probably good for the Cuban people. It'll be interesting to see how this progresses in 2015. But I asked Quincy Worthington for his thoughts on this important change in foreign policy.
On a very selfish level, I'm looking forward to getting Cuban cigars. I don't know. It seems silly that it's gone on this long. I think it should probably help the Cuban economy probably more than the American economy, but it seems like the right move. I mean, I think at this point, most of us have forgotten why this embargo was even put in place. And, a lot of us who took history, which sometimes I wonder how much of America actually has, we know about the Cuban Missile Crisis and Day of Pigs and, Castro and all these things. But, it's more of our father's embargo than it is ours. So it just seems weird that it's gone on this long.
A lot of the conversation I had with Quincy kind of came back to the topic of corporate influence on at least culture in the United States, if not worldwide. So for his last words on this episode, I'd like to use some of his comments on that topic.
Yeah. I mean, when you look at, like Jack Kennedy, who was speaking out against the steel mills and what they were doing, and compare that to modern corporation life, I mean, it's a pretty incredible comparison. And Kennedy, was a flawed man, obviously, but, he made some pretty empowered speeches and made some pretty bold actions, and it's a shame. I thought Obama would be, similar to that, but he's really kind of had a lukewarm response to a lot of things, and this is one of them.
2014 brought a shakeup in the world of late-night television. It's been most of my life a pretty steady platform of Jay Leno, David Letterman, then we got Conan O'Brien into the mix, and we got Jimmy Kimmel into the mix. And, of course, this year Jimmy Fallon took over the reins of The Tonight Show in 2014, which put Jay Leno into retirement. And in 2014, David Letterman announced that he's set to retire. I believe it's 145 days away from when I record this podcast, which means that he needed a successor. So Stephen Colbert got the pick, and that means Stephen Colbert then retired his late-night character of Stephen Colbert so that he would be prepared to take over The Late Show in 2015. This caused Craig Ferguson to quit The Late Late Show, and he retired just last week, and maybe as a slight to David Letterman, had Jay Leno on as his final guest. I asked both Gary and Owen their comments on the changing tide and changing canvas of late night, and here's what Owen had to say.
The world will be a sadder place with less David Letterman in it, but, you know, time marches on. I don't necessarily know that Colbert is the guy to replace him, but he's going to have his own take on it. It's not going to be the Colbert Nation. It's not going to be the Rapport. So, you know, who knows what Stephen Colbert is without the character, without the mask. We'll see what it looks like. But, you know, there was a certain air of I don't give a fuck that came off of David Letterman. It came from his literally stepping on in the early 80s, 82, 83, when he had his first show, you know, and there was very much a never ready for prime time kind of feeling. So you know, it's going to be a different kind of late night. I look forward to seeing what it looks like. On Fallon, I think Fallon's awesome. I think that he's really captured kind of the Tonight Show vibe that Johnny Carson had, where it's, you know, he's the host of a party, and you know, he's quirky, and it really lends itself to his ability. I mean, like back when he was on Saturday Night Live, he was always the guy that was going to mug. He was always the guy that was going to break. The guy who always thought he was a lot funnier than the scene he was in. But when he's hosting and he can really, you know, start jamming with the people he's interviewing, that's where he excels, I think. And when Bono couldn't go on because he had broken his hand and almost got sucked out of an airplane, what have you, when he and the Roots did their U2 impersonation, it was dead on. In fact, it was better than seeing U2 live.
I myself am just a huge David Letterman fan. I have been my entire life, and it's really hard for me imagining the second half of next year in a world without my TV pal, David Letterman, every night, helping me process what's going on in the world and poking fun at popular culture. Maybe because of that, I haven't been able to take to Jimmy Fallon at The Tonight Show the way that my friends have. To me, it's been more of celebrity game night with Jimmy Fallon, and that's despite thinking the Roots are one of the greatest bands of all time. Craig Ferguson, I think, is also a loss. As Letterman deconstructed late night from what Johnny Carson was doing, we got to watch Craig Ferguson deconstruct it even further with David Letterman. And my curiosity to the next reigns of late night, of what we'll see in this changing canvas, is who will be pushing the buttons. But I asked Gary Peters to also comment on this topic, and he had some interesting things to say.
I think what Jimmy Fallon's doing is awesome. Seth Meyers, too, has been pretty good. I've been watching a little bit of that lately, too. But I met Jay Leno at one of those meet and greet things. Oh, man, he looked tired, man. But he'd just flown in from Vegas, so... and I was never a huge Leno fan until I saw him on stage. And he did, basically a monologue for 2 hours. Just, rapid fire. Nothing that, doubled you over, laughing, but, he was just a machine. It was awesome to watch him, just to watch him do stand-up, so... But about late night, yeah, it needed to be, it needed a little jump start, and I think that it's getting there in 2014.
At the top of the pop charts, and maybe this is just a sign of me being an aging musician, I was pretty unfamiliar with a lot of the stuff going on. Number one song in the country was Pharrell with Happy. I was most familiar with that song through the Weird Al parody of it. The number one album was Ed Sheeran's X, and the number one music video was Katy Perry's Dark Horse featuring Juicy J, which I gotta confess I don't know what that is. But I asked Owen Niland about popular music, which he's much more in tune than I, and this is what he had to say.
Although I have X on my phone, I don't listen to it very regularly. I will say that, Pharrell's Happy when it came out, come on. He caught lightning in a bottle. It was a catchy, exciting little tune. So, I think that was great pop music. It came on the radio, it made me happy, and then it went away, and I think that is great pop music. I am not really a big pop music kind of fan. But, if it's on the radio and I like it, there's a good chance I'll download the album. Although I did not download whatever album Happy was on with Pharrell. I think his hat scared me off eventually.
Gary Peters.
I've been very, very into pop music as of late, and I always have been, but I think pop music's at an all-time high right now, too. I'm an old guy, but I'm willing to say that,
Turning back to the internet for our final topic on our look back at 2014, we look at what the most visited site on the internet was, and for the first time in a long time, it wasn't Google. In fact, Google was number 3 behind Twitter and number 1, Facebook. So I first asked Owen Niland for his commentary on why we're more social than curious in 2014, and here's what he had to offer.
Well, Facebook is ubiquitous. It is the way that we have as a culture, at least my culture, has decided to communicate with one another. It's through a screen. It's very hands-off, and I have noticed in the past 3 years that I do not see the people who matter in my life as often, but I know more about what's going on from a very, from a tailored standpoint. You can really create your own Facebook reality where it doesn't really matter what's going on in your life, but you're going to put the smiling selfie up. You're going to, make the, oh my gosh, I've had such a fantastic week post, or conversely, oh no, boo-hoo-hoo, woe is me, Facebook whining. But, it seems that there's less and less direct integration between people these days on a face-to-face basis. And it's happening with the people that I care most about in my life, that I just don't see them because I don't need to. I see what they're up to, and I go, oh, that's great, okay, and then I move on. And I think that's sad from you know, as you get older, it's easier and easier to isolate yourself because you don't need to reach out to find out how people are anymore. You just, you know, flip open the app on your phone, and, you know, there's all the people. I got caught up on them, and I don't have to speak with them. So it's tidier, but is it better in the long run? I don't think so.
I asked Gary Peters to comment on this same topic.
I don't know why. Facebook is just... I think I go to Facebook to make myself feel better a lot of days, just because most of what I see on Facebook is just people complaining about their pitiful lives, and, you know, it's just like... It's life-affirming to go onto Facebook and see that, you know, you've got problems too, but, you know, Susan Swanson can't find her sock, and that's her status. It's like, what? How awful for you, you know? And then, you know, the follow-up is all the people who... That's the thing. I love it when people post stuff that's really negative and, like, depressing, and people like it. I'm like, is that right? Are you supposed to like it? Or are you supposed to like it and then, like, put a caveat there, like, I'm thumbs-upping this, but, boy, it sucks being you, or, you know, sorry to hear about your cat, or whatever, you know. It's just so strange. Facebook's full of old people, too. That's probably the other thing. You know how, like, only old people vote? It's probably the same thing with Facebook. Like, just, it's like old people with nothing else to do except repost things about the NRA.
And so, those were our conversations about 2014 that I decided to share with all of you. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you had a wonderful 2014, and cheers to an even better 2015. Thanks again. The Salamone podcast is taped live